Christmas carols being sung by a choir.
Something like that going on right now.
Folks dressed up like Eskimos. So, that's going. Everything's going with you.
Well, good. So, I'm in this program along with this Launch and Lead program right now. So I'm doing two sort of academic things at once. Thankfully, Launch and Lead, they say, we're not going to do anything in December because most of you are working pastors. We understand. But I've gotten some feedback back on some 360 evaluations on them. And I've also gotten feedback back on some of my 360 evaluations I had to do for the provisional process for the UMC. And I've been thinking about them in conjunction with stuff I've been working on here, and actually being able to read some people's comments on these 360 evaluations where I answer questions and they answer questions and they provide comments and feedback. And I guess one of the interesting things, something I saw pop up a lot more than I would have expected in my in one of my 360 feedbacks, was that Carl works too much or works too hard. And we worry about burnout with them, which is fascinating. I don't know who said that. However, it was fascinating. And at the same time, I have been starting to try to scale back a little bit, which, like I said in class earlier, has been frustrating with feeling like there has been some underperformance, and I'm really comfortable picking up the slack when need be. And so I'm living in that tension of hearing some people say you have permission to do less. And I'm pretty sure most of those voices came from the bigger church I'm at, where I'm at more often. At Old Bethel, there's people who question how much I actually work, which is fascinating to me. They're like, how many hours does Carl put in a week? Like 20? Which is weird. Because I'm not there very often because they don't have an internet connection. Beyond that, though, it's just been a fascinating thing to look at. Those things paired with what's going on and what I'm working on in CPE, sort of speaking to each other and working through all of that at the same time. I didn't expect the two programs to complement each other so well.
Okay.
And so I guess what I'm trying to think through is what it looks like to be intentional in the next few weeks, especially as I talk to my pastor parish relations committee. They're kind of like our HR in the church.
Sure.
Talk to them about sort of some evaluative things we have to do. It's not a pastor's evaluation that we're meeting for. We're meeting to talk about sort of evaluation of the church's ministry as people talk about whether they want to stay at the church or not. But I'm wondering how I sort of bring up what I'm trying to do and what I've been going through over the last few months. I think in that place would probably be the best place to bring it up between the two churches, SPRCs, at the same time. And I'm still not sure whether I'm going to say I want to stay at that church or not, because of an interesting conversation with my boss the other week.
Okay. Well, let's start with your first question.
Yeah, we'll start with the first question first.
What do you think the response or the reaction would be if you just shared what you just shared here with me, that you've been learning certain things in CPE and this other class that have pricked your soul a little bit, and that you're recognizing that part of the pattern could be that the harder you work at trying to make things go smoothly, go well, that it has an unintended consequence, and that others who may be able to take up more responsibility don't. So, you're wrestling with how that all gets shaped out in the church, how it affects ministry, how it affects the long-term viability of you know, the church's ability to do the things that it wants to do and says it wants to do.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it affects the partnership that pastor and people have together. You know, what would you think response be to starting off with that kind of?
I think that's a great thing to start off with. I think I might get some really good feedback, and once again, this could be false narratives I'm throwing out. I feel like I'd still get some really good feedback, or positive feedback anyway, and sort of we understand stuff from Welltown. Old Bethel, I don't know if they'd even respond. However, I've seen that happen at Old Bethel over the last year. Last year when I decided to pull back, literally work there half the time I used to work there, the congregation has grown by over 50% from my not being around as often, which is fascinating. And I don't know if that's the whole reason, but that's the only change I've made in the last year. I don't know that people in the church are doing more, but I think by my not pushing people as much or pushing people as hard, anxiety has gone down within the church maybe,
Mm-hmm.
and that's helped it be a place where people want to be more.
Mm-hmm.
So I think they might be able to see that, and that's something I could possibly bring up too, maybe to get their feedback on it a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
I think that would be a helpful way to pull them into the conversation. And I mean, even at Welltown, when I came there, they were going from a full-time pastor to a half-time pastor, and almost immediately things got better than what they had been. It could be because my name wasn't Wayne, and it could be because the pastor was no longer as much the focal point, which is, over the last 2 years, I think, sort of ramped back up in a lot of ways, to where oftentimes I'm working more than 40 hours a week on Welltown stuff.
Mm-hmm.
More than a pastor making a full salary would make.
Sure. So, yeah, you know, and it also sounds like to me, from your learning goals and everything that you communicate to us in CPE, that with this insight and this learning that you have, you are, sounds to me like you're wanting to balance out the program side of the pastorate with the relationship, making relationships with
Yeah.
people stronger,
Yeah.
being more relational as a.
And I think
As
that's
a
something
pastor.
people at the church would like and appreciate.
Yeah.
I think in programming us so heavily, or whatever we're doing,
Mhm.
most of my attention isn't in relationships a lot of times. I mean, I have a few strong relationships with people at the churches, but it's far more of a, I feel like my leadership style is a lot more corporate than pastoral.
Mhm.
Might be a good way to term it.
Sure. Yeah.
Which I don't know if it's ever going to be something where I'm a extremely pastoral pastor. I honestly don't think that's where my gifts lie, is in being pastoral. However, I think there is room for improvement
Sure.
there.
Yeah. Yes. And I think that the ability to establish, you know, personal relationships, even at a large church or a corporate sized church, serves the pastor and the people well.
Yeah.
You know, I think about the pastors I've known that have served larger churches, 1,000 members or something like that, the ones who avoid more of the anxiety and the tension seem to be the ones who concentrate on the relationships first, and try to establish a good board or a good council, good working with boundaries and training like that, and the pastoral staff to be saying, yeah, we're going to be in hospitals, we're going to be in nursing homes, we're going to be in people's houses, and yeah, we're going to teach Sunday school, but we're going to teach Sunday school just in order to be with our people and to share interests in their life and things like that. So I think that there's a way to be both. And some people are going to naturally fall with stronger tendencies one side or the other. But I think, at least for me, and this is the way I think about it, at least for me, it balances. It balances and makes me feel like I'm more whole. When I can think of great programs all day long. But it's the ability to be able to relate to people one-on-one and enjoy being with people.
Yeah.
That allows those programs to.
And a lot of what I think I'm sort of working on in my own head is how do I turn a lot of this, any programming we have back over to the laity. It's something I feel like I've almost taken from them unintentionally over the last couple of years. How do I hand it back to them and really give them ownership over certain things? And I think that's going to be a difficult process for me, handing things back, especially when things like this past weekend didn't pan out when I tried to do it.
Sure. So, yeah, how do you communicate that without the idea that you're going to be absent from it? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That it's now on them, and I don't think I hear you saying that. But I'm wondering if some of the anxiety, maybe with the Christmas program, was we've got to do it without him, kind of thing.
Maybe a little bit.
So rather than, I wonder if you can talk about partnering with them, equal partnership with leadership of the church. Say, for me to be able to do this more, which I think benefits all of us. I think we need to have a stronger partnership in the program life.
Yeah. I think so. And there are areas where I do a pretty good job with that. However, when it comes to anything like bigger that the church is doing, it often tends to fall on me a little bit. Even when I try and make it clear that I'm trying to make this as laity-led as possible. Maybe the idea of partnerships will work better than saying this is laity-led. Because then they don't feel like they're all alone. However, I think it might give them some agency.
I'm struck by the differences in your two congregations and how they operate and how. And I guess the question I have is, and maybe this is just I'm just taking from your perspective. It sounds like maybe the people at Welltown are a little more invested in one another and enjoy maybe being with one another a little more. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm wondering how you can create that sense of fellowship for Old Bethel.
Yeah, that's been something that's been difficult. We've done more in the last year. We had sort of a picnic day at the end of school, and we had a blessing of the animals service, and there was another day where we had a special band come in, and then we had stuff afterwards. And then I said, let's have a Christmas party. And it got to about 3 or 4 weeks ago, and they said, Carl, do we really have to have this Christmas party? We kind of just want to go home after church. Okay.
So, what would you suggest in Old Bethel's history or their present reality kind of leads to that thinking?
One thing in their history that could lead to that thinking is they had always been a family church. So I imagine after church, a lot of times, a lot of families would go home together in a large family church. So like everybody would go to one family's home, and as that family sort of dispersed, and it became less a family church and more just a congregational attendance church, people who became part of the church were less connected with one another. And still, while there were family gatherings, it wasn't really a church gathering. And maybe over time, that's sort of, the church wasn't able to pick up on sort of the activities that a family gathering would be. I think of probably the most successful thing they do that is fellowship-based is making apple butter. And we have family members come out and help out the church who don't go to the church, help with apple butter every year.
Do you think they see that in themselves?
I've spoken to it before.
Okay.
Yeah.
What was the response?
I could probably speak to it again now. It was a long time ago. But the response then was, yeah, that's sort of the way it's just happened over time.
Sort of sounding resigned to it.
Yeah. Kids don't come back after they're here. It just happens. Well, no, they don't come back.
Yeah, gosh, my first parish was down in southern Page County, a little town of Shenandoah, which at the time still thought of itself as a railroad town, even though it used to be a major stop along from the Hagerstown to Roanoke route. But when diesel engines came along, they didn't need to stop there. I mean, it still had a train station, and you can, it's where cars from Page County would wind up and then get attached to a train, but that was about it. I mean, that diesel was perfectly able to bypass Shenandoah.
Yeah.
But there was a thought that if only the railroad would come back, kind of thing, we would be okay. And then how that gets translated, and then there became a lot of anxiety about their children, because for generations people were able to grow up in that community and then get a job in that community and stay in that community and raise their own children in that community.
There ain't nobody moving to Shenandoah to get a job anymore.
So, well, it's now become, it's much better than it was. It's become a bedroom community for Harrisonburg.
Okay.
But it has, I mean, the anxiety about children, and the fear that if they went off to college, they would never come back. And so every year, Page County would list all of the students who are graduating from the two high schools in Page County, and would list what their plans were for after graduation. And it was just really interesting. Maybe a third of them were going away to college, and of that third, maybe 2/3 of that third were going to the local community college. And then the others were, I'm going to get a job at Merck, or I'm going to work with my dad on farm, or all of these lower expectations. And I just wonder about those kids, if they really had dreams and ambitions beyond what their parents' anxiety allowed them to have. And it was just remarkable about that, and how that anxiety just tamps down the next generation's, really their ability to function. It was
Yeah.
fascinating to observe that. And I think it was frustrating as hell being a pastor in that sort of circumstances, when you'd say, somebody would come to you and goes, you know, my son wants to go to college, what am I going to do? Let him go, you know. Well, why wouldn't you? And it was the great fear that then they would never come back. So, yeah, so, you know, it sounds like maybe Old Bethel has some generational things
Maybe.
going on that are, or at least an image of what the church was, and that's kind of hard to
I think.
let go of.
I think maybe. I think less and less.
Okay.
I mean, 2 weeks ago, half the people in church didn't go to our church last year.
Okay.
It was a low attendance week because of the snow and people scared to death of snow. But still, there's a large amount of people who, well, most people I would say in the church are not affiliated with the families that used to be part of that
Okay.
church. I think they've sort of moved on from that. But I do think it's possible that that's where not really having church activity stems from in that church. That portion of the culture may have outlived most of the families.
Do you think the newer people would like to have more activities?
Yeah, if they were convenient. I mean, we've had far more activities
Mhm.
in the last year than they've ever had. And, I mean, activities are great. This is a church that doesn't even like to have meetings. Like, it's pulling teeth to get them to have 4 administrative council meetings a year. And then they complain about communication, like, okay. And I said in our last SPRC meeting that was just that church, I said, if y'all want to complain about communication, that's fine, but you're not going to get good communication with only 4 meetings a year. You need monthly meetings if that's going to happen, and nobody has made an effort to fix that.
Oh, we don't have a communication problem.
Oh yeah, just remember we don't have a communication problem. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you ever, what is the opportunity to meet with leadership of both the congregations together? Is there an
There's never been an
an
opportunity for
to do
that. No. It was made pretty clear to me when I got there that the churches were kind of going to be separate. They were put together when I got there.
Yeah,
they weren't together.
They were just
before
yoked
that.
when you got there, yeah.
Yeah. They were put together so I would have a job. So thank you, District Superintendent.
Mhm.
But before that, they'd never been together. And they've never really gotten together outside of SPRC meetings. That's the only
That's the
That's
only
the only
place
thing
where
they share.
they share
Yeah.
SPCRC?
Yeah.
Okay. Is there a different dynamic from the representatives of the churches when they meet in SPRC?
We usually meet at Old Bethel because we meet right after church on Sundays, and that's where I finish church. So Welltown
Okay.
comes over, and we usually have about even numbers then because a couple people from Welltown might not make it. Old Bethel might not have enough people there.
Mm-hmm.
There's usually about 6 to 8 people at the meeting. Some of the people who would be down on me if it was just Old Bethel talking don't talk because Welltown is so high on me and so happy with me a lot of times. And they have false narratives of each other, I think, that I've tried to work through and fix because they don't know each other, obviously. But they have false narratives of each other. I think Old Bethel feels like they don't have as much of a voice because Welltown pays more for me. Which was never the intention when I called for Welltown to start paying me 3/4 of my salary and Old Bethel only paid me 1/4.
Mm-hmm.
That was never the intention behind it.
Mm-hmm.
that's what it's become.
In your mind,
I think that's in Old Bethel's mind.
Uh-huh.
I don't think anybody at Welltown has ever brought that up.
Okay.
Because Welltown sees Old Bethel as having helped them when they were really in trouble, still. Because, I mean, they couldn't pay the electric bill when I got there. And cutting their pastor's salary in half is how the church survived.
And you've been there,
Since July 2015.
okay, a little
I'm in
over
here
2
3
years, yeah. In your mind, do you think it would be helpful for there to be greater cooperation between the two?
Not really.
Okay.
There's no issues between the two churches. They have amicable relationships, I'll say, for the most part. They don't hate each other or anything like that.
But sometimes it sounds like
I
being
think-
the pastor to Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
It does.
Uh-huh.
And, I mean, part of it is, I don't know if it would be helpful or hurtful if they were together more often.
Yeah.
It might be one or the other. It might have no effect at all on either church. We have done stuff together. We've done like Bible study together and stuff like that before. But when we'll flip flop where we're meeting, when Bible studies at Old Bethel, only people from Old Bethel come. When it's at Welltown, the people are happy with being siloed. And for the most part, as far as charges go, they're pretty far away. They're like 15 minutes apart.
Mm-hmm.
Which for the area is further away than it would be if we were further down in the valley, I think. 15 minutes wouldn't be such a big deal if we were further down towards Woodstock or something. But it's a bigger deal around Winchester.
So for the sake of ministry, for the sake of developing, establishing programs and relationships, what do you believe needs to happen as a parish that's not happening?
I don't know if anything right now needs to happen. I don't want to mess with Old Bethel right now because they keep on getting bigger. I really don't want to change anything right there,
Okay.
right at this moment.
Okay.
I think in the long run, especially since they're thinking about selling their parsonage, they would be a healthier church if they were part-time without a full-time pastor, which would mean they didn't have to pay for the pastor's housing and they wouldn't have to pay for the pastor's health benefits or pension. And that would save them enough money to where I think they could actually operate as a they wouldn't be losing money every year. And I think they could continue to grow if they had a pastor that was committed to them still. Because we talk about part-time, and I've been a part-time pastor. You still care about your church just as much. So I think they'd probably be better off if if Old Bethel wasn't connected to Welltown, and Welltown might be better off if they were connected to another church that they could do ministry with, or lasting ministry with. And I still think that and I don't know if I'm the pastor to be at those churches when and if that would happen. It sort of goes to my second thing I was talking about today. So I've been working for about the same time I've been in CPE on looking what it looks like to do new communities, and after a charge conference on November 12th, I just mentioned to my district superintendent, it'd be nice if you gave me one of them downtown churches to do what I'm thinking. And he said, well, we can look into that. I said, alrighty then. And so I talked with Rhonda Van Dyke, Don Mann's daughter, and she's been thinking about one of these churches in town too to do something at. And so we just wanted to talk, and she's in Launch and Lead with me too. We just wanted to talk with our district superintendent Larry about what's going on, and sort of try and figure out how receptive he was to these new ideas we're sort of bringing to the table, for like co-working space, an intentional community living area with a sort of AmeriCorps United Methodist twist on it, a downtown concert venue, something like that, that doesn't look like a church right now. And Larry mentioned to me a church downtown that we could possibly do something at, and it was actually the church that Rhonda's been looking at for months now and dreaming about, and not ever actually talking to that church's pastor about, because she's not sure if she'd like to do it with that church's pastor, because she just doesn't know how they'd fit together. And after about 30 minutes of telling about Launch and Lead, about these different opportunities or options or things that we're learning about, he says, well, if you actually had an idea, I might be perceptive to it or something, but y'all should go and y'all should figure out what you really want to do, and that'd be great. And so I said, okay, so here's the deal. And I told him what we're thinking through and all that. And you could tell he actually got excited about it. And he says, well, you know what we need to do very first, right? I said, well, no. And actually, I started talking about logistics of what I need to do if I was already at that church doing everything. He said, well, first we need to talk about appointment. Do you want to move? I said, well, I don't know if I really feel comfortable asking for somebody else's church. And he's like, well, I'm your DS and I'm asking you to ask for a church. And so I said, yeah, I love that church. And that church is going through hard times right now itself. I'd be taking on a real project. And so he was meeting with their pastor the next week to see if she wanted to stay, which, through no fault of her own, the church is going through hard times. She got there, like the next week, they said, our endowment's gone.
It was just Keiko Foster.
Yeah. Poor Keiko. I love her to death, but it's just nothing seems to be going right there. And he's not sure if she wants to stay. So I'm waiting till January 3rd to see if she wants to stay or not, because I don't know whether I'm going to be asking to stay at the churches I'm at, or whether I'm going to say I'd be okay leaving if it meant I could try this new thing. Because honestly, both of my churches I'm at right now, they can do what they're doing now without me. I think we've gotten to a point where Welltown's in a much better position than they were when I got there, financially anyway. Somebody else might be better to lead them towards more membership or stronger spiritual development stuff, but financially they're in the best place maybe they've ever been. And Old Bethel's in the best place they've been for probably 15 years. They still need to get more people in the door so that they can pay their bills, or they need to find ways to cut how much they're spending for long-term sustainability at that church and viability. I have some ideas I would talk about how to redistrict all that with my boss, but I feel that's a little bit out of